Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. This is the post-fight review for the Tony Yoka and Christian Hammer fight, which was in France. Yoka grabbing the decision, going all 10 rounds with Hammer. I didn't have an issue with the decision. I didn't hear the card, so I don't know the exact scores, but I thought Tony Yoka did enough to win the fight. Although he was made to work for it, because Christian Hammer, as we know, can make it a bit ugly and frustrating. He's done that against the likes of Luis Ortiz and Alexander Povetkin, and it was the similar sort of modus operandi in here. He actually made Yoka sort of fight his fight, which ultimately, and we'll come to it, I thought was a bit of a mistake, because Tony Yoka sort of gave up his height and reach and was fighting a lot on the inside, and I'm not necessarily sure that's his wheelhouse. But what I will say is, before I get into a couple of the things, observations from the fight, I think some people will probably overreact to this performance. They will say that Tony Yoka is now down on their depth chart, that they weren't impressed, that they didn't see anything impressive about this performance. But I would sort of counter that with, this is a very good learning fight. The sort of fight a lot of heavyweight prospects are begging for right now. Someone like a Filip Hrgović can just not get this sort of fight. Someone like a Hammer who's top 25, top 30, somewhere there or thereabouts. Maybe he's not as good as he used to be, but he's still a good measuring stick, a good yardstick. He can go rounds, he can make it difficult, and this is the development type of fight that prospects need. Bearing in mind that Hammer just in recent years has fought Alexander Povetkin and Luis Ortiz, as I mentioned, and they were about 30 or so fights deep into their careers at this point. So this is a good win for Tony Yoka, having the name of Christian Hammer on his resume as his 9th fight. So I think it would be an overreaction for people to just sort of write Tony Yoka off. Maybe he does need some more development fights before stepping up to the likes of a Derek Chisora, which he has mentioned previously as maybe wanting to fight in 2021. But Christian Hammer is a very appropriate level, a very good fight, a good learning fight for him, and he won. So he did pass the test ultimately. Didn't look perfect, and I said in the lead up to this that he may not look perfect, but a win is a win is a win. But there were some things that I didn't quite like, but I did like that this was a good learning fight, and that Yoka, is really making some good steps and strides in his career. And the fact that he's beaten Johan Dorper, Christian Hammer, looks to be facing Peter Milas next. If he can win that Milas fight, that's a very good 2020. But the fight proper, because I just want to I'll wrap up the action really quickly, because honestly it did devolve into a bit of a war of attrition in there. You had the opening couple of rounds where I thought Tony Yoka looked pretty sharp, but I did think his energy reserves and his energy started to really sort of sap, and he was certainly more low volume from after about round 3 or 4. And I think Christian Hammer, he certainly contributed to that. He was leaning on Yoka. He was throwing, forearms and using his head. He was being really rough and sometimes a bit dirty in the clinch. And ultimately, he was trying to make it as awkward and difficult for Tony Yoka in this fight. Bearing in mind, Hammer came in just under 260 pounds. He'd recently had COVID, hadn't been in the gym as much in preparation for this fight. So the fact Hammer was able to go 10 as well was a testament to his durability too. But he is a canny veteran, and he was using all those moves in there. And I think to some extent he was able to suck Tony Yoka in to his style of fight. Because remembering, Tony Yoka has significant height and a reach advantage over Christian Hammer. Yoka often in this fight was fighting quite small. He was certainly letting Hammer just walk right in. He wasn't punishing Hammer when he was coming to the inside. He was allowing him to come in, and he was working away with Hammer. And for me, I thought that's the only sort of fight that Christian Hammer can win. Hammer coming in and getting to the inside is exactly what Hammer needed to do to be in the fight. And he was probably in the fight more than he probably should have been if Tony Yoka could have kept him on the end of a jab at the outside, popping him with the right hand and punishing him when he came in. You saw a little bit of that from time to time, but there was large stretches of the fight where Hammer was able to just slip right in, and it was just inside fighting. And I don't really think that's Tony Yoka's wheelhouse. And sure, Christian Hammer was easy to hit, and Yoka was having some success there to the body. He was throwing uppercuts, obviously the right around the guard from the inside, and also when he was at range too, that was finding a home through the fight. But alternatively, Hammer was able to have a degree of success on the inside too. Maybe he didn't land anything so flush that you sort of thought, well, this is really going to test Tony Yoka's chin. But I thought Yoka got hit, not necessarily to the head, but in general, sort of to the body, maybe a bit more than I was sort of expecting that he would. But some of that because fighting from the inside for a lot of the time. I thought that Tony Yoka's jab, he sort of, was working it at times early in the fight, and it just sort of seemed to disappear. He was allowing Christian Hammer to come in, and I didn't really sort of expect some of that. But there was, I think, a lack of urgency at times from Tony Yoka. There were times that maybe he could have put his foot on the gas, maybe just picked up the tempo a bit more, because on occasions where he did that through some combinations, he was able to have Christian Hammer under a bit of pressure, but then he took the foot off the gas again. And with Hammer coming in maybe a bit overweight, underdone on the training front because of COVID, but also, Hammer was, pretty comfortable fighting at that lower volume sort of pace. Yoka just really played right into the sort of strategy and style that Christian Hammer could only be successful in, allowing him to have some success in the fight. Although Tony Yoka, I think, in the majority of the rounds, was doing enough, to win rounds, and not necessarily by wide margins, but enough to win the rounds. So I was surprised how low volume it was, but also, where was the counterpunching? It just sort of seemed to be non-existent. I thought Tony Yoka, there were opportunities where he could have thrown counter right hands and caught up with Christian Hammer, but there was just a lot of one-off punching, sort of, throw the right hand or a 1-2 or an uppercut and then back to the high guard, not really looking for the counter opportunity. And I certainly thought that one thing we didn't see, which I was hoping to see, was Yoka adapting in there. But it seemed to be, after about the third or the fourth round, it was mostly all of the same right to the end. He didn't seem to know how to sort of crack the Christian Hammer puzzle, although, as I mentioned, he was sort of falling into Hammer's strategy and style of fight that Hammer wanted to fight, and the way that it sort of ended up playing out. But I thought there were different points in the fight where he could have stepped on the gas, or he could have made some adjustments. Why not, go back to working from the outside, make Christian Hammer pay with the long right hand coming in? It seemed to be a lack of adaptability. He had a game plan, he stuck to it, and it did work, and his corner was saying to him, don't really try too much, in the final rounds, just make sure that you can get the victory here, don't take too many risks. Overall, it was a mixed bag. Tony Yoka looked good in spots, especially I think the first round or two. There were some, thunning punches coming in. He was looking for that right around the guard. But overall, and it sort of made me remember that performance of Daniel Dubois versus Kevin Johnson. After a while, he just seemed to run out of ideas about what to do next, how to get the guy out of there. And certainly the commentary, and if you had the international language commentary like I did, it was all a one-way street for Tony Yoka, not really sort of recognizing some of the things Christian Hammer was doing, or the fact that Hammer was making it more difficult for Tony Yoka than the commentary would actually have you believe. So overall, it was a good test. He passed it. He didn't necessarily impress to the level I'm sure that many would have expected. But a win is a win is a win. And I would like to see maybe a few more Christian Hammer types in the next year or so. I mean, they're talking about that he's going to be ready for a title potentially in 2021. That's possibly optimistic. He needs more rounds. He needs more tough, savvy veterans, guys who've been in there, done that, can frustrate him. But he's got to come in with plans and a plan B and a plan C if things aren't going according to plan A. Don't know if we saw that tonight. What did you make of it all? Drop a comment, loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe. Follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.